I feel like a visitor in my dream, even when I'm lucid. I feel that the dream is doing something. It has an agenda. Maybe it's extemporizing and creating it as it goes along, but it's its own agenda. In other words, the dream seems to want to explore its own territory that I would not be inclined to explore if I were lucid. So that I have gotten the feeling that I can be an unwanted guest if I'm too lucid in my dream. If I'm too heavy-handed in hijacking the dream, then it's as if my subconscious will say, oh, to hell with you. I can come back another time, have this dream, I'm going home.
I have two awesome gifts to share with you guys that are going to help you become better lucid dreamers and also connect with other people who really love dreams as much as we do. The first one is the Dreamosophy community. You can join for free as my guest. Use the code DREAM100. Click the link in the description to download the challenge app and register for Dreamosophy. Dreamosophy is an awesome community of people. Everybody has their own gifts, and we share with each other and talk about dreams and even our wins in our daily lives. You can join their challenge app for free. Use the link in my description. The second thing is actually created by the guest in today's episode, Lincoln Stoller. He wrote a book called Becoming Lucid, Self-Awareness in Waking Life and in Sleep. And you can get a free PDF of his book, which is a really, really great book. He knows a lot about what he's talking about. So you can get the free PDF by signing up for his email list, and you can also get free audio recordings and meditations that he includes with his book. So please welcome today's guest, Lincoln Stoller.
I'm kind of fluid in defining myself, but I have come to appreciate my early years more as time goes on. I wouldn't say escaped, but I got out of a suburban life as a teenager by starting to go mountaineering when I was 13. And it was a rough start, but I ended up all over the world and also pursued graduate school. So I got a PhD in physics in Texas. And that was about the time when I started to scale back on the mountaineering. Too much time, too much risk. And I went into software and spent a couple of decades developing accounting software. I was interested in markets, and I was told accounting would be a way to understand them, and I knew computers. So I grasped that issue, which was interesting because I'd come from an intellectual background where I was trying to figure things out and found myself in a business environment where answers were not as important as selling and process and who you know. It, in a roundabout way, took me to other cultures. The mountaineering took me to other countries. So I was interested in the cultures, and I experienced religions and alternate views of the world and reality. And, you question these things when you get to know people who think differently. So I was involved in ceremonies and psychedelics and meditation and stuff like that. And that drew me into psychology, which I was always reticent about because I thought it was BS. And now that I am a psychologist, I can assure you it is BS. And I think, it's fairly, at least from my point of view, easy to see that when you're thinking about the mind and reality and control of your world, you start to wonder about your dreams, or more broadly, dreaming style thinking, which you encounter when you're dreaming, but also when you're being creative, also when you're in an extreme situation. Mountaineering started me on that path. But people who do extreme sports or do any sports to extreme encounter that altered state of mind. Not exactly a dream state, but certainly ethereal. And sometimes, it's called the flow state or various other things. And it can be quite dramatically different from normal. I then spent quite a bit of time in three areas related to psychology. Neurology, I learned brain training and neurofeedback, and hypnosis. I became a certified hypnotherapist. And most recently, I became a clinical counselor because that's sort of the standard path to therapy. And if you don't have the standard path, you kind of don't make it onto anyone's radar. So that's what I am now, a clinical counselor, hypnotherapist, neurofeedback practitioner who understands that dreams are very fundamental or, yeah, I have to say it just to lead into that book. It's not just dreams. It's the understanding of your states of mind. States, meaning plural. And the book, Becoming Lucid, was kind of my response to the notion that dreaming simply was either being out of it, as in just a witness, or being lucid, which meant you were aware that you're dreaming. And I wanted to say, no, that's not enough. First of all, there's all ranges of lucidity. I remember a typical dream that I would have would be I'm trying to fly, and I would struggle and strain, and I would manage to get myself off the earth by 6 inches. Is that lucid or not? I wasn't in full control. I wasn't fully aware I was dreaming, but it was a strange experience of realizing I had self-control, but it was very limited. Other times I could fly better. Also, I kind of think most importantly, our waking life is not particularly lucid. It's just very regular. We've learned to appreciate it and accept it as normal, except sometimes when things go awry, like you have a car accident when, the world falls apart, or, your romantic partner goes off the deep end, or you go off the deep end, and reality seems to get bent. So I wrote this book called Becoming Lucid to address what it is to be lucid in basically 4 states of mind. You don't always have the same kind of dreams. There's REM sleep where you have one kind of dream, and there's non-REM sleep where you tend to have another kind of dream, which we tend not to remember, but you sometimes do. And then there's the waking state, being aware of what you're seeing and what's going through your mind. And then there's these 2 liminal states of falling asleep and waking up, which we kind of throw away. Falling asleep is kind of just waiting for the bus to arrive to take you off to Neverland. But it doesn't have to be that. You can meditate and you can start to create images. And the same when you're waking up, which is even more important if you're interested in remembering your dreams, because that's the only time you'll find their trace. If you don't remember dreams as you're waking up, you probably won't remember them much later. So that's what the book is about. Really, lucidity at its root, and not specifically dreaming lucidity. Okay, that's my introduction.
I love it. That's really awesome. It seems like you really know what you're talking about because, anybody who has dreams or is into lucidity will realize, like you were saying, that lucidity is a spectrum. There's various levels of it throughout our waking life and our dream life. I mean, like you said, you may know that you're dreaming, but you can't control it. You may be semi-lucid. You may just have an inkling that something is off and that you may be dreaming. You might just get taken away into the narrative of the dream. And the same applies for our waking life. We can sleepwalk mindlessly, or we can be mindful and make actual choices within our lives. So I think that's really, really awesome. It's good that you talk about that. And I love what you said about the liminal phases, which for anybody listening is known as hypnagogia and hypnopompia, when you're falling asleep and waking up. And a lot of people think of those, like you said, as a transitional period, but it can also be a destination. There's so many dreams there and so many opportunities for creativity there. So that's super cool that you are bringing this stuff and writing about it.
It's funny. I've had a couple of dreams in my life, which seemed kind of, dramatic at the time, but I wouldn't have thought that I'd be remembering them 30 years later. Yet somehow they turned out to be important. It's sort of strange. So one dream I wanted to tell you about, and this was so long ago, I can't remember. It could have been 20, it could have been 40 years ago. No, I don't think it was. I think it was more like 10. Hard to say. It was a dream in which I was wandering through a decaying and sort of horrible house. It was one of those, you're not sure if it's a horror story or just depressing. Typically in dreams, you're not quite sure what your emotions are, and they're kind of all over the place, or they can be. And people are different, of course. Anyway, so this house was really unappetizing, unappealing, and I would say it would borderline horrible. And I knew I didn't like it, but I didn't know it was a dream. So I was, stuck with it, exploring passageways that I'd rather not be in, with a feeling of foreboding and despair, anything you want. The point was that I entered the hypnopompic phase of waking up. I remembered the dream, and I remembered how I was dissatisfied, and I wasn't waking up entirely. I was in that kind of floating phase. I mean, we could talk about those phases and how they change with age and what you can do with them, but I was prepared to go back to sleep. So I said to myself, quite consciously, in the waking state, that I didn't want that dream to end like that, and I didn't want to accept it. So I told myself, not quite sure I would succeed, that I would go back to the dream and I would destroy that house. I would just obliterate it. In fact, I think I imagined getting into a bulldozer while I was awake and creating an image of destroying this whole scenario that I did not like being in. And then I fell asleep. And either I dreamed it or I remember what I thought in a dreamlike way, so that when I finally woke up for the day, I felt I had actually returned and destroyed the negative dream. Now, I don't really know if I did or I remembered it as I did, or it was something that happened in that hypnopompic space and that was enough. But like I say, I remembered this for, decades. It was a very satisfying experience. It wasn't exactly lucid, but it was certainly intentional. And I don't know why, but it felt life-changing. So I just wanted to throw that in because it shows so many things. You wouldn't have thought that such a small action and idea would have such significance. And maybe its significance was that it was more empowering than anything else, that I could actually change my mood and memory with just taking advantage of that hypnopompic space to both remember the dream and what I wanted it to become, and then doing something to make it happen.
That's really awesome. And, like most people would understand how a dream can really affect your mood for your day. It can have an impact on your psyche and all that. So what you're describing, this dream reentry, it's really great. You can intentionally go back into the dream, and it can be done with imagination. It can be done whether you're lucid or not. It's just about, like you said, the intention, because our subconscious mind will listen to what we say, and whatever intention we want to set about what we want to dream about, it pays attention to that, and that manifests, So the fact that you were able to go back into the dream and using that liminal phase is a really good way to do it, because you're kind of still teetering on the edge of consciousness. You go back into the dream. That's really awesome that you were able to do that. It's cool how our dream memories, are very similar to remembering our waking life memories. They're impactful, they're emotional, they affect us, they stick with us. So it's really, we spend a third of our lives there. So it's cool how you're able to remember dreams 10, 20 years later. Do you keep a dream journal at all, or write your dreams down?
No, because if I did, I'd have so many dreams I wouldn't have time to have a waking life. I kind of have to plan it. If I want to remember my dreams, I will. The question is, where is the experience I need most accessible? And I may be mistaken. Yeah, I probably am mistaken. I sort of feel that I have the most control in my conscious life. So when I want my world to change, I want to do it consciously. That may be a mistake. And I sort of think it is a general mistake that we make, that we have so much conscious control and we undervalue our subconscious. So I'm just admitting it. Sometimes dreams break through without my intention, and I wake up with their memory. It's usually the important dreams that do that. Well, I don't know they are important, but they feel important at the time. And I'll make a very special attempt to review the dream, to file the dream properly in terms of what I feel its meaning is, and return to it throughout the day to see if I get any more insight. And then I just let it go. So I don't keep a dream journal. What I do, if I want to remember dreams, and this is what I suggest other people to do if they want to remember dreams, is just keep a notepad and to be very careful not to write too much when you wake up at night, simply because you don't want to disrupt the dream to the point where you can't return to it. And also because you don't need much to remember a dream. You just need a starting point. And it's like, pulling on the thread of a knitted sweater. It seems like it just comes out when you pull on it to a point. I think if you look at the geography of any dream, it has peaks and valleys, and there are sort of thematic roadways where it has some continuity. And then there are these disjunctures where it flips from one theme to another so radically that you have a hard time remembering what came before. So it comes back in bits. And if a dream is, I'm not really sure about this, I'd like to know what you think. When we wake up and we remember a dream that we know we've had 40 minutes to 60 minutes of rapid eye movement dreaming, is it all one continuous dream, or is it a series of little vignettes that are separated by sort of blackouts. Because when you try to remember it, sometimes it seems like you can step back, to another theme where things are quite different. First I was in high school, then I was, floating around in space. But the further you go back, it seems the harder it is to make those jumps to a new dream scene. So
Yeah.
I suspect that we have a lot more dreams than we ever can remember. Don't you think?
I completely agree. I think there's so much that goes on, and we wake up remembering such a portion of it. And, the same thing happens to me when I'll remember dreams. I'll remember various little scenes, and sometimes I can't really make out if they're all together or if they're separate. Sometimes I'll just group them together if they feel like they were close together, or sometimes they transition into like a string of different dream scenes. And what I'll do sometimes is, like you said, I won't wake up too much. I just have a little notebook by my bed, and I'll write down some key words, like some very basic bullet points without even moving my body or anything.
Right.
Because, your body position is linked to your dream recall in your mind. And I'll just, reach my hand over, write down some keywords like a location, an object, or a person. And then that one word will help me remember it later. And then the rest of the dream sometimes starts coming back to me. And yeah, it can definitely be confusing. I think that we remember little snippets of a whole bigger story, and there's so much to it.
When do you decide that you want to put an effort into remembering a dream? Or do you always?
I pretty much always do. Sometimes in the morning when I'm still very tired, I always have this period of, this isn't worth it. I don't really remember much. I don't really write it down. But then after like a couple minutes, I'm like, no, I remember a significant amount and I want to remember it. And if I don't write it down now, it'll slip away. Yeah. And maybe something random during my waking life will trigger a dream memory. But other than that, it'll slip away if I don't remember it. So if I remember enough details, and if it has a strong emotion to it, and if it's something that I want to go back and read later, I write down most of my dreams down pretty consistently. And I'll go back later. After I write the keywords, I'll go back and I'll write the whole story as much as I can remember later on during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how long does it take you on average to write a day's journal entry?
Not that long. I mean, maybe like 5 minutes, not even, because I'll have the keywords. And then I'll remember the dream based off the keywords. If it's like a dream, sometimes it's 2 or 3 dreams. And then I'll just write it out like a story. Like I was in my room. I, saw this person. We did this. We did that. This is how I felt. And that's it. I'll just write like a little paragraph about what I remember. I have had dreams that felt like super, super long that have taken me like more than 15 minutes to write down because it felt like hours worth of a dream. Those are really fun. And I definitely want to remember those because those are powerful. I always feel like there's so much information in there and it might make sense later. So I always don't want to miss any details. I try to remember as many details as I can.
As a therapist, I encourage everybody I suggest that they consider dream work, which usually requires a little explanation and some instruction about how you might do it better. I don't press people to do it, because it can be difficult for some people and it can be disturbing or it can be personal. And unless I feel that it's important, I don't want to distract whatever their agenda is. But I get some people whose dream life is predominant, and they write me copious reports. So I asked you how much time you spend because I wonder how people's recollection reflects their actual dreams. So that are the people who have mild recollections having mild dreams, or are they just writing them to a short extent? I have not got a good answer to that because some people report, you've mentioned sometimes you have detailed dreams. I think, it's been said, I use the word cautiously when I say scientifically, that your dreams operate in real time, which is to say what seems to take 5 minutes in your dream actually took 5 minutes to dream. So that if we know that you're spending, so the way that dreaming works is that you go through these phases, rapid eye movement phases that get, you have several of them before you wake up. And I think it's probably accurate to say that you only remember dreams from the phases you wake up in. So that if you've had 3 dream phases and you wake up at the last one, you've lost whatever dreaming went on for the previous first 2. I don't know, how detailed are people's dreams? When we remember a detailed dream, is that because we didn't remember the details of the other dreams, or that they didn't have details? What do you think?
I definitely think it's a recall thing. What I've noticed, it's kind of like awareness. When you're going through your life, are you paying attention to the small things, to what's going on around you? How consciously aware are you of your surroundings? I think the same is in a dream. And, for me, like the time in my dream never matches up. Like sometimes I'll go to sleep, I'll pay attention to the time. I'll have a dream that feels like an hour, 2 hours. Like I'm in the dream doing things for a long period of time and I'll wake up and it's been 10 minutes. So I think that the time can be totally random. But sometimes it definitely depends on my level of awareness and my level of intention. When I'm lucid, especially when my consciousness is fully there, I'm fully aware, I'm more mindful. I purposefully and intentionally look around in my dreams. I read details. There's so many things in my dreams. There's colors. It's more vivid than real life, I like to say, because there's colors. I read things. Sometimes it's gibberish. Sometimes it's legible. There's, little people have interesting clothing, houses, like objects. It's just full of things. I'll be like in a room full of things, like somebody lives there full time. And when I'm lucid, I love to just observe. I'll look at all the details. I'll feel all the little textures down to like the carpet fibers, and I'll just be in awe of how detailed it is. And sometimes it's so detailed that I can't even remember all of it. And while I'm lucid, I'll try to remember my keywords because I know that I'm in the dream and I'm like kind of mentally rehearsing it so that when I wake up, I can remember as much as possible. And that helps me because I just fully accept while I'm lucid, like this dream has been so long, there's no way I'm going to remember every detail of it. And I don't, but I remember as much as I can.
I feel like a visitor in my dream, even when I'm lucid. I feel that the dream is doing something. It has an agenda. Maybe it's extemporizing and creating it as it goes along, but it's its own agenda. In other words, the dream seems to want to explore its own territory that I would not be inclined to explore if I were lucid. So that I have gotten the feeling that I can be an unwanted guest if I'm too lucid in my dream. If I'm too heavy-handed in hijacking the dream, then it's as if my subconscious will say, oh, to hell with you. I can come back another time, have this dream, I'm going home. And then I'm left with just sort of like an empty imagination where I can fly through walls and, blow things up. And it ends up not having the kind of deep meaning that my subconscious could put into the dream.
What I've noticed, you're completely on track, because what I've noticed is we have our dreams, and our dream space is its own entity that communicates with us in whatever ways. And when we're lucid, we exert our ego into the dream. So instead of going with the narrative of the dream, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to change the sky, I want to go here. You're not going with the dream anymore. You're exerting your control, which is fun and all. But you know how many people I've talked to, myself included, that say like, oh yeah, when I got lucid, they told me to lay low, or they kicked me out of the dream, or some police figures woke me up or whatever. This has happened to me multiple times. They've told me like, oh, this place is not for dreamers. And there's this saying that I really love. It goes, when you're dreaming, you can control the ship, but not the sea. And what that means is, you can have fun and you can control, but at the end of the day, this is not our space. We are humans. Like the waking world is our space. The dream world, it's kind of like therapy. We go there to work things out, to get answers. And sometimes when we're too lucid, like you said, we miss the bigger picture of the dream. So I always tell people lucid dreaming is fun and everybody should do it, but all your dreams are important. And sometimes we have to really just accept the message and go with the dream. So much that when I'm lucid, sometimes instead of doing things, I just observe and I just see what the dream is trying to tell me instead of trying to change it.
Right. Yeah, I do find that the most exciting. It's like, what do they say? You couldn't make this stuff up. That's what I feel like. If I tried to make up the dream consciously, it wouldn't nearly be as wild as what the dream shows me without my intention. Not only does the dream tend to be more than I could have thought of, but in many cases, it's more chaotic, more disruptive, more uncomfortable, not because it evokes images of discomfort or horror or unpleasantness, but because it explores things that don't fit together anymore. So I remember another one of these old memories where I was having some amorous encounter with some figure. I don't even remember the figure, but then they turned into a pig. And that was just disturbing, because it upset my expectation. Even as a dreamer, I just wasn't particularly lucid. And I remembered the disturbance that I felt. And I sort of felt the dream's purpose was to say, look, these are the patterns you've made, and look how they don't fit together. And I felt like a child who had their pacifier taken away. I was just going to sort of just sit there sucking on my preferred image. And the dream said, no, look at all the other things you've attached. I wouldn't have thought of doing that. And I probably wouldn't have if I did think of doing that. But the dream put me there. And like I say, I've remembered that stupid dream for, God knows how long.
It's sometimes the dream will just do something completely opposite of what you want. And it's almost like to tell you or to remind you that, we can't always be in control. We have to be able to release that. And, like lucidity is a gift is the way I see it. It's not something that we should just take advantage of and everything will always go our way. Because even when you're fully lucid and you're good at controlling your dreams, even sometimes I try to do one thing and something completely different happens. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's try something else.
So people say that dreaming, they say sleeping works to consolidate your memory. I don't really know what that means. So I've been trying to understand that. And I've been thinking, in order to understand that concept of consolidating your memory, I think about memory. And I think memory is, to a large extent, the combination of facts and associations. So if you just have facts and no associations, it makes as much sense as a library card filing system without any content. In other words, not much, doesn't take you anywhere. And if you have content without any associations, which is to say you just have memories and you don't know how they relate to each other, you're equally lost. So what I'm thinking is, in dreaming, and this is just sort of me theorizing, in dreaming, I think I'm trying to put things together. I think I'm trying to put disparate things together and similar things together. And I feel that my dreaming experience, what little I remember of it, is an exploration of how things relate to each other or don't. So what I'm trying to do when I wake up and remember my dreams, and to some extent, as you know, it bleeds into your dreams. What you consciously try to do bleeds into your dreams. I try to look for associations between things when I'm in my dreams or when I'm thinking about my dreams. And I find there are a lot of associations, a lot of similarities. What I find is the images in dreams are often reflections of each other. So if you're in a turbulent dream, you'll find a lot of turbulent details. Or maybe it's your state of mind will find turbulence in the details. And I find this helps me understand the dream, not as a narrative, but as a platter of related ideas in which I'm just sort of bouncing around between them. Again, not as a narrative, just as an exploration. It's like if you come to a meeting of people you don't know, you don't necessarily create a narrative between them. You try to get to know each of them. And I feel sort of satisfied when I have accomplished understanding my dream characters and scenes as different points of view on some whole. What do you think? Does it make any sense?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I've noticed that my dreams will kind of be a mixture of sometimes things that I'm thinking of, things that I'm thinking of before bed, especially things going on in my life, sometimes even random things that I saw in the corner of my eye that I didn't even realize I picked up on.
Right.
And then mixed in there will be some messages of things I've been stressed about and messages from, new things as well. So I definitely think there's a combination, like you said, of a lot of things going on there.
How do you use intention to shape or guide your dreams? Do you?
Yes, most definitely. 2 ways. And one way is as I'm falling asleep, part of my night routine, I do my little prayer, affirmations, whatever. And I kind of think about, okay, I want to dream about this, and not like a specific, scene, but more so like I want clarity about this topic, or, I need guidance, with this project or whatever. And the second way, which I know maybe you talk about in your book a little bit, is mindfulness throughout my daily life. A lot of people forget that dream work starts in your waking life, and
yes,
that mindfulness of what you focus on and where you drive your attention to will affect your dreams. So I try to be very mindful and intentional with everything I do during my daily life. And I even think about my dreams as I'm going throughout my day. I'm like, okay, my dreams, maybe tonight I can think about this, or, I'll ask for guidance during this. So I kind of set the intention throughout my day as well. And I call that lucid living.
Yes, I want to take off on that. If you're in a dream and you're taking control of the dream, as we've said, often kind of impetuous or childish in your intention because you here the dream is going to give you some sort of bizarre Shakespearean plot, and you want something simple and, recreational. And, it's sort of a struggle as to which way the dream will go. And you can imagine that in a dream, if you prevailed and insisted that, I'm not going to go into a house of mirrors, I'm just going to go to an amusement park and I'm going to have fun. You'll have this dream in which you have fun, and it will be relatively not memorable. Well, you'll remember something, but it won't be challenging. And then, you might think, gee, what did I miss? I missed having a good critique of my life, or I missed seeing all the subconscious elements that are playing in my life. So, that would be one attitude of having a lucid experience in a dream. And what I importantly want to say is that operates exactly as your real life. If you're encountering something in your real waking life, I shouldn't say real, they're both real, in your waking life, and you insist that you're going to experience it in an amusement park frame of mind, you might call this asserting a false personality, insisting that you take people's comments in the way you want them to be received, and not exploring some conflicts that maybe are latent in other people or yourself. And then at the end of the day, you'll have to say, well, I had an amusing day, and I missed most of the informative content that could have been consciously available. So what I'm saying is that I'm following your comment that lucidity is something you do during the day. And as what I tried to do in this book is to say that dreaming and setting your intention and having your intention influence your experience is something you do in the daytime. And it definitely affects what you're left with at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree with you. I think that's fascinating. But I wanted to ask you, just like how you got into lucid dreaming and that led you to write the book in the first place.
I think I got into it through trance work. I feel there's not a great deal of difference in the goals of trance work from the goals of dreaming. I mean, the context is different. It's more intentional. So trance work has involved a number of things that are dreamlike. One was, as I first encountered climbing mountains, there's a lot of discomfort in mountaineering. Obviously, it's uphill. Uphill is boring when you do it for 15 minutes. It gets even more boring when you do it for 15 hours, especially under heavy weight, high risk, and other difficult circumstances. So you tend to go into an altered state of mind. You find less pain. You just sort of shut the pain out because there is all kinds of soreness and various other things. And it's often funny. After a day of mountaineering, you look at your hands and they're all bleeding and torn up, and you have no recollection of hurting them ever. And they never felt uncomfortable. They look like they've gone through a garden shredder. And this is typical. It's almost funny. And I think any athlete would say, the same thing. You have an accident on the field and you often don't know it until you get off. So I started to experiencing altered states and what we might call altered states of lucidity in those extreme experiences. And then I attempted to follow this sort of shamanic and, somewhat religious path. I don't call it religious, spiritual, where you do sort of journeying and walkabouts. And there was a school of spiritual thought called Eureka, which I don't hear much of anymore. It was a little ridiculous. But it was invented by the same guy who invented the Enneagram, which is still quite prevalent and popular. He had a whole series of exercises and a whole philosophy, which is basically shamanic. He had an exercise called the desert, which he described as basically sensory deprivation. You go and lie down and you fall asleep and you don't move for 3 days. And when you go into this, you say, well, I'll have to get up to pee and I'll have to get up to eat. And it's true, but after a while, you stop peeing and you stop eating and you stop drinking and there's nothing else to do. And after 18 hours, you can't even sleep anymore. And that's when you move into a liminal state and you constantly flip in and out of dreams. We talk about waking up. The hypnopompic state lasts about 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of your day. But in this exercise, it lasts for 36 hours. And some totally weird stuff happens. More psychedelic, more distressing, more psychosomatic than anything I've ever done. In cases I would get feverish, physically. I would have dreams, I guess they were dreams, you can't even tell at that point, that have never left me. Far more impactful than any chemical psychedelic I've taken, as I say, with one exception. But with that stuff in mind, and you start getting involved with dreaming and psychotherapy and counseling and other people's stories, you start to appreciate dreams more because they're always there. In fact, you're doing them whether you're aware of it or not. And you're not even sure whether you're welcome in the dream or whether you can be helpful. So I've taken the approach, I try to tell other people to do this, but I'm not sure I can explain it to them, of requesting access to my dreams. So rather than saying, I'm going to remember my dreams or I'm going to be lucid in my dreams, I take the attitude that I ask permission to play a role in my dreams. So give me a role, give me a small bit part in this dream. And I'd like to have as much awareness and control and recollection as possible, but I see my subconscious as the director and author of the dream, and that I, my conscious self, am just a kind of a stand-in. And if I'm good and I do my lines properly, I'll be accorded more insight, recollection, power, directorial power to make changes, perhaps. And I just like that feeling. I feel in consonance with my dreams when I take the sort of humble approach. And so this is what I say. I would like to tell other people to do this, but I'm not sure I'd be understood. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It makes complete sense. And it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I like how you said a humble approach, because I think the dream wants us to understand that there's way more beyond our physical body, and that we are so small in terms of the scale of the universe. And sometimes, when we go into the dream and we think we know everything and we have this attitude, like we miss out on the bigger picture. It's good to just really understand that something is coming to us, instead of us creating the dream. It's not our dream. It's a dream that exists, and we're experiencing it. And if you remember it, that's like a gift. It's like something special. So I definitely cherish my dreams. I always try to take that humble approach, It's hard to explain, but I know exactly how you feel. It's interesting what you were saying about the deprivation and how you were exploring your consciousness in that way. I thought that was super fascinating how, dreams is one way that we can explore our consciousness. People do things like you were saying, hypnosis, meditation, liminal dreaming, psychedelics. There's so many different ways to understand what our consciousness really is. And I think that's super cool. It's very humbling for sure.
I get people who say, and I think many more people think, but don't say, that they'd like a miracle cure for whatever their ailment is. That's not unfair. I mean, we'd all like our problems to disappear somehow, magically. And there are people who have, especially as you get older, an accumulation of problems or regrets and an accumulation of desires. And I encounter these people and I listen to their story and I think to myself, just how much are they willing to do for their miracles? Do they think that this is a lottery and if they just keep entering it long enough, they're going to win? Because that's not true. I think you have to work on making miracles happen.
Definitely.
And I only call them miracles because they're miraculous, not because I know anything about how they operate. I try to push myself. It's sometimes hard. Again, we get back to lucidity. Do you really know what's going on in your world? I try to push myself to do what I resist. So, for example, every day I go for a walk for an hour. That's a long time when you're a busy person. And there's an inclination to put it off. There's something valuable in just doing it, in just saying, I'm not going to follow my obsession religiously. I'm going to deviate and give myself some other time. And it has a cumulative beneficial effect. So when I deal with therapy clients, who say they need a miracle cure, I'm usually struck by the fact that they're not taking any risks. I don't want to tell them to take risks because I don't want to be responsible for the risks they take. But I would suggest to them, maybe if you want something unusual to happen, you're going to have to invest in something unusual with the understanding that these things often don't play out. You can't hold it against them, but you've got to try. And I would say, to sort of wrap things up, that if you want to experience the miraculous in this context, you have to make the effort to become more involved with your dreams or your subconscious in all the various ways you can do that. And the more you can do, the probably in a kind of statistical sense, the more likely you'll have a positive experience. That often isn't what someone wants to hear. They want a solution to their problem right now. And that's not the way solutions come. They come after a lot of openness, humility, experience, the kind of pain of growth, the kind of pain you get after exercise. You have to distinguish pain that's positive from pain that's negative. Sometimes hard to do. The biggest problem is like heartbreak. Everybody thinks heartbreak is bad, but I tend to think heartbreak is actually a very positive opportunity. So that's pretty far-fetched. But anyway, that's kind of my attitude toward dreams. You have to be really an adventurer.
Yeah, that's true. And it's really about building your own personal practice. There's so many different techniques and routines and things you can do. It's about really tapping into yourself, finding what works for you. What is your routine, And that's kind of why I love having these types of conversations, because we're all so different. All of our minds work differently. And, it's really about consistency and being so tapped into your waking life and your dream life that it's a continuous flow of consciousness continuously. Right. And it's not easy. We're still human. It's not easy. We still get caught up in emotions and desperation. But it's definitely a lifelong journey. And I think that leads me to one other thing I wanted to ask you before we finish off. Because I've noticed, throughout the years, sometimes I'll have droughts and I won't dream for a few years even, or I'll go through things and I'll stop caring and then I'll come back to it and get into it again. How have you noticed that dreaming has changed as you get older? How does your dream life change and evolve? And, like the ebbs and flows of life, have you noticed that at all?
Like you mentioned, the dream life is not disconnected. It is connected to your conscious life. So part of the answer is, how did your conscious life change as you get older? I think for most people, they become more focused. Their opportunities become more limited. Their behavior becomes more regular. And I think their dream life responds. I wouldn't say it parallels, but it responds. What I think is the main difference between the dreaming and waking life is that the waking life perceives time as linear and life as a series of scenes, and it tries to organize them and direct them and predict them. And the dream life, the dream world, undoes that and sees time as largely irrelevant. And it takes all the memories and experiences, projections and hopes, fears, and it lays them all out horizontally and starts to play a game of Scrabble with them, try to make scenes, words, themes, emotions out of them without any regard to the narrative. Although when we remember the dream, we're trying to put it in a narrative form. I don't think the dream is particularly narrative. They're ideas that we express in sentences and paragraphs, but they're not linear, or sequential, or serial. And I think that's the important function that the dreams are doing, and that we can, in our waking life, look at our lives more horizontally and less serially if we want to. So here's the answer to your question. If you live as you get older in a more limited, serial, defined, and restricted way, which I don't want to say almost everyone, but it's true. Almost everyone does. I mean, not me and not us, perhaps, and maybe not the listeners either, but most everybody else.
True.
Then your dreams are going to reflect that. And I don't know if that means they'll become more linear or they'll do exactly the opposite. Because I think one of the things that happens to older people is they get depressed in a different way that younger people get depressed because they can't make the future the way they want. Older people get depressed because the past wasn't what they wanted it to be. And I think in both cases, you have to become broader in your conscious life and try to expand and explore those horizons and possibilities in your dreaming life. Maybe that's becoming lucid, or maybe it's becoming letting go and just letting the dream take you, because that's a kind of lucidity too. Show me the unknown is a lucid question that is not demanding any particular response. And from the report of dreamers, that's often the best question you can ask in a dream, to show me what I don't know. And sometimes the dream can just explode into detail of wonder. So that sort of gets back to the idea of miracles as well. But anyway, to answer that question, how does the dream change with age? I struggle against becoming constricted in my life, in my waking life. I'm always looking for new opportunity, and I think my dreaming life appreciates that. In other words, I'm doing what I say the dream is trying to do, to find associations and new meaning in putting things together. And I try in my waking life not to be hung up on saying what has to happen, and to accept who I am. This is like probably the central struggle of every human being, is to accept who they are, and that they are or would be completely correct if they didn't try to change themselves. It's sort of contradictory, but it's like loving yourself. It's one of the big themes that keeps coming up in my interviews with people and my therapy with clients. Learning to appreciate yourself without guilt and anger is a critical part to your path. I don't know, now I keep feeling like I'm falling off the deep end, but there it is.
Yeah, that's deep stuff, honestly. You're totally right. It's very inspiring. I think that's a good message for everybody. And it's part of the reason why I love dreams so much. I hope that I can always, as I get older, remember why I got into it and continue to cherish every moment. And not be so hard on myself. So I definitely needed to hear that too. And I'm sure a lot of listeners did as well. Yeah, to close off, why don't you talk a little bit about where people can find you, where they can buy your book, and any other closing statements?
Sure, I appreciate that. Thanks. I always forget about that at the end. I have a blog. You can subscribe. I have a website. It's very deep in the clickable sense, and it's at mindstrengthbalance.com, mindstrengthbalance.com, and it's laid out in topics. Sleep is one area, therapy is another area, coaching is a third, learning is a fourth, and neurofeedback is a fifth. I think that's pretty much it. And they're all related. So if you would go and subscribe to my blog, you'll get this stream of blog posts on these various topics, trying to pull them together. There's a free subscription that gives you a, monthly post, and a paid subscription which gives you weekly post. And I've been reading everything, narrating everything, because some people like to listen to these rather than read them. I appreciate that. And then these interviews we do with people, podcasters, I put on there too. So mindstrengthbalance.com. And if you find it interesting, I have a virtual meetup once a month, and everyone's free to join. And I offer therapy or counseling or coaching or consulting. And I really don't distinguish those. I'm really against the idea that you have to be in one category or the other. So I invite you to check it out at mindstrengthbalance.com. If you sign up, you get a link to a free digital download. I guess I'll change it today to Becoming Lucid, since that's what we talked about. So if you sign up for the free blog, you'll get a link to Becoming Lucid, and you can read it. And it has audio self-hypnosis files that you can download.
Wow, I'm going to sign up today. You can find the Dream World podcast on Instagram, and also follow me on TikTok, Amina's Dream World. I post some really awesome content on there, and you can also find it on YouTube and Pinterest. So if you support the show, follow me and help me support myself.